Hey there, voters. I'm Julianne Grimm, editor of the Santa Fe Reporter, and you're joining us for our SFR candidate chat. I'm here today with Tim Keller, who's a former state senator who is now seeking the position of New Mexico state auditor. And Tim, we invited your opponent, Robert Aragón, to appear with you, but he didn't respond to our invitation. So that means you get to tell us what the big difference is between you and your opponent.
Okay, well, I think there's probably two differences, primarily. One is he's a lawyer and has been around for a long time, 30 years or so, involved in different political activities and so forth. I'm a relative newcomer based on that and have a background in finance and of course have been in the legislature. And I think the other main policy difference actually is, well, let me say what's the same. We both actually have, I think, some fairly aggressive ideas for the state auditor's office. And but the difference is, I want to crack down on fraud, waste, and abuse, and so does he. But I also want to take it a step further and push policies that will prevent fraud, waste, and abuse from happening in the first place. So I want to also be an agent of good, in a sense, trying to fix problems before they occur, as opposed to just coming in at the back end and saying, here's what's wrong.
Okay, I'm glad you talked about that, because you have mentioned before in some of your appearances that you're really interested in looking at how effective some of the tax breaks are for special interests and whether they really create jobs, whether they really serve New Mexicans. So how can you really affect change from the state auditor's chair versus, being a legislator maybe?
Sure. Well, this is my favorite example because this is one of the reasons why I'm running for state auditor. As a legislator, I've passed a bill known as the tax expenditure budget, and I've passed it twice. And each time I've passed it, it's been vetoed. And I passed it with unanimous once, bipartisan, the whole 9 yards. But the issue is, it has to do with power, and the executive branch doesn't want to forfeit the knowledge of what those tax breaks actually are and how many jobs they create and how much they cost. The amazing thing about the state auditor's office is I can actually do that report on my own. So I'm going to use the powers that are available in the state auditor's office, which is access to information through subpoena power, and the research capabilities of the staff and the contracted staff, to actually try and produce New Mexico's first tax expenditure budget. Something that ironically, as a legislature, despite passing that law twice, was never able to actually see happen because of the vetoes. And so I think that's a good example. For me, I think I can do basically what I've done in the legislature, but with much more impact as state auditor.
Okay. Now, I read somewhere that your day job is business consultant. So tell us what that really means.
Right, that could be anything, especially in New Mexico. Everyone's a business consultant. But I've actually worked in business and finance ever since I graduated college. So I started in investment banking, actually, which you price securities. It was sort of a Wall Street gig. It didn't quite work out so well, probably on both ends. So I ended up going to business school, got my MBA. And since then, basically what I do is a lot of budget forecasting and a lot of pricing studies. And so, lots of sort of accounting/finance work. That's what I've done most of my career, which I think is a nice tie into the auditor's office, because when we think about what we just talked about, even those are the kinds of analyses that I do professionally. And so I might be one of the first auditors to actually do my own work as well, because that kind of scoring and demonstrating return on investment, things like that, that's what I do in my day job.
Well, you're aware, I don't know if you all are aware, that the current state auditor, Hector Balderas, is running for state attorney general. Do you see the state auditor job as a stepping stone to something else?
Well, not to attorney general for me, because I'm not a lawyer, so I could never run for that. But for me, I'm relatively young, I think, which is wonderful.
How old are you?
36.
Okay.
And so people ask me about that, and I mention my age only because I love public service. I came back home to New Mexico, where I was born and raised, specifically to get involved in public service. Might be on the appointed level or as staff or on the elected level. So yes, I do. I'm young enough. I hope this isn't my last run. But spending 4 or 8 years in the auditor's office, I think, is a wonderful fit for me in terms of my expertise and my background. And certainly if I do good, hopefully voters will want to see more of me.
You've talked about special audits of education programs like the A through F grading situation and the teacher evaluations. Can you talk about how you can affect policy change there, considering that the auditor hasn't really covered that ground in the past?
Well, there's ability in the auditor's office. There's not a whole lot of resources or funding, but you can choose sort of 10 or so special audits every year. And you can use those to basically demonstrate where there's fraud, waste, and abuse. This, I think, is a great example of where there's probably waste, for lack of a better term, but even just sort of inconsistency or poor governance. And so, I happen to not support those policies in general as a legislator, but I think what's even worse is that they are being implemented in a way that is completely uneven and unfair. So we have a situation where I think we've got a bad policy piled on top of bad administration, and that's really hurting schools. So if you look at the inconsistency in the way the ABCDF has been done each year, and also in the teacher evaluations, the administration's even admitted that these results are sort of all over the map and then they have to redo them. This is why we audit things, to make sure that they're sort of statistically fair. And so those programs should be audited, I think, no matter what. And if they're not being done automatically as they should be, I'll go in as the state auditor and do it for them and make sure that even if there are policies I don't agree with, they're going to be implemented fairly.
So it's not just how much this costs or how much we're spending and how much we're gaining from it. It's really, has it been administered fairly? Are the algorithms working? That kind of stuff? Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly right. And
okay.
This is also where we get into issues like the behavioral health audit. And was there a good reason for an audit? Probably. Were there accounting issues? Probably. But are we going to use that to kick off 80% of the providers in our state and bring in Arizona companies? That's just the audit process gone bad. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to make sure that we try and do it the right way. And above all, I think true north for the auditor, is sort of transparency and, fairness for everyone. And when that's not happening, I'm going to try and jump in and fix it.
Okay, thanks. Well, I appreciate all of your answers. Hey, voters, early voting is happening now, and Election Day is November 4th, so we hope to see you there.